Hello, I'm Regina McCann-Hess, president of Forge Wealth Management, and welcome to our Women in Wealth series. Today, I have a new friend with me. And Angela, can you tell us who you are, what you do, and what you love about what you do?
Absolutely. Good morning. I'm Angela Dora Dobrzynski, formerly Marcasani. I just got married in 2021 and changed my name. Thank you. I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of Pennsylvania and teletherapy provider in the state of Florida. And I'm in private practice with an office in Downingtown and doing teletherapy. I'm also an author and a writer and a presenter and podcaster. So a little bit of a lot of things to sort of help people heal. And I guess that is what I love most about my work, having that opportunity, working with people who are hurting or a little lost, a little confused, maybe a little lonely, and helping them through those times. And I also love that I'm now self-employed fully, which has been such a gift and just such a great thing for myself, my life, my family.
Yeah, it is. It is wonderful to be, control your own destiny, so to speak. Yeah, that's great. And then I know before we started recording, we had such a fabulous conversation and we were talking about loss. And, originally I approached it as bereavement loss of someone you love, whether or not, it's a spouse or a family member that passes away. But you pointed out something really, really important. We experience loss in life too, without losing a life, through changes in life, like we were talking about our kids going off to college and moving out of the house, or through a divorce or a major breakup. And I don't think a lot of people, and I certainly don't, immediately go there. We don't really think about that proactively, like, oh, I just experienced a loss. And, what can I do to help myself, recover and heal from this? So I didn't know if you want to say a few words about that, because I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, I'd love to. My specialty area is grief. About half of my clients come to me for grief, usually after a death, as you pointed out. But what happens then often, the death becomes, the sort of obvious loss. And then as we get to know each other more, we uncover all these other losses in life that now have this cumulative effect. It, of course, makes a death loss even harder to face. And then that said, I certainly, whether or not we lose someone to death, there's all these losses, like you just mentioned, kids going away, even moving is a loss, changing jobs, retirement is another huge loss for a lot of people. As much as people look forward to it sometimes and plan for it, there's a lot of loss in retirement and losing that aspect of your identity, which, our work can define us in a lot of ways. And often it's a lot of our social life too.
Yeah.
Um, so those non-death losses can be just as challenging to navigate, but people often don't identify them as losses to grieve. And
True.
so, at least in my practice, when I'm working with people and I identify them as losses to grieve, people are like, oh, yeah, that's what's going on. It's grief,
Yep.
And so to identify it is such a helpful start.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And then to, it's kind of almost when you realize something, then it's like the realization is actually part of the healing as well. So I think that's, a great thing to point out.
Yeah, I think that's probably like 50% of therapy is like the realizing and identification of something, because just, naming something validates it. And that's, such a comfort to us.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I do want to plug your book a little bit. I know it's not like a brand new off the shelf book, but the Unmoored book, Guide for Grieving People. Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, so prior to private practice, I was a bereavement counselor for a hospice for several years. And I worked with mostly it was clients who lost a spouse, but other loved ones as well. It was, exclusively losses to death in that case. And over the years, I had a few clients who would say to me, you have to write a book, or, something. They'd have some aha moment while we're talking and they'd say, I'm going to write that down. You need to write a book one day. And then when the world sort of shut down in 2020, I'm like, well, now might be a good time. So I started, sketching out some like a sort of draft, and then my own life had a ton of transition in just a couple years. So it was sort of, shelved for a little bit. And then this winter I revisited. I finished the manuscript. It's a small book. It's 65 pages. It's meant to be for people who are experiencing a loss, death or non-death loss, and could just use a little comfort, little guidance, little insight. And it's intentionally short and in small little pieces, because with grief brain, we often can't focus on anything too long, too deep. So I did that and self-published. It's on Amazon, and it's been a fun thing to share with people.
That's great. That's great. I can't wait to read it. I really look forward to it. And thank you for contributing that, because there's so many people out there who do need some guidance, through their grief and through their healing. So that I think that's a really helpful, item that you added there.
I do hope so.
Yeah. No, so tell me about the podcast too. I think that's exciting.
Yeah, so switching gears entirely, on the other end of my work, I work with a lot of clients who have adolescents, teens or young adults, high school, college age typically. And I myself have two 14-year-olds, and a colleague and I, Rajuda, we used to work together at Women's Resource Center. She's also now in her private practice. She works almost exclusively with adolescents in her practice. And she also has two teenagers, or one about to be a teenager, and a 16-year-old. And we just, we talk regularly. And one day we were like, we should do a podcast about this. So we started developing the concept of a podcast for parents of teens. It's called #AnswerMyCall, because we find ourselves saying that, like screaming that into our phones. Why did I even get you a phone? Why do you have a phone if you don't answer my call?
Absolutely too. They don't. They're
it's so frustrating. But that's why we named it #AnswerMyCall. And we talk about all different topics. We have only a few episodes live right now. We post on Mondays. But we've interviewed a dietitian, we've interviewed a psychiatric nurse practitioner, we've had discussions amongst ourselves about, some of the challenges unique to contemporary parenthood, like parenting teens in this particular time.
Yeah, tough.
It's so tough, and it's every generation has their own tough. But I think sometimes, again, back to that naming and identifying something, to recognize how the internet has changed our experience of parenting as opposed to previous generations, or to recognize how in our generation the word parent is often used as a verb, not just a noun. And our parents, they were parents. They didn't talk about how they parent. It was a whole different different.
Very true. Very true. Never thought about it that way, but that is right on money.
And I think it's a different sort of pressure, like growing up in the 80s and 90s, at least for me, it was sort of hands-off parenting, it was a little free-range kids. It's not like that now.
No.
So anyway, we thought we would do this as both professionals and parents, to have these, like 30-minute conversations, hopefully to support, validate, maybe inform parents of teens that are all in the thick of it right now.
That is absolutely awesome. I'm gonna listen on my way home today.
Oh, good. Enjoy. I'd love to hear what you think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm wondering if people wanted to follow you or, reach out to you for any of the services that you work in, how would they find you?
The easiest way is probably my website, which can then direct to everywhere else. It's angeladora.org. I use my first and middle name as my website because you have heard my last name and my maiden name, Dobrzynski and Marcasani. So angeladora.org, there's a contact form on the website. There's more information about my services. I write a blog as well. So that's there for people to read.
Wow. Okay. So you just do everything. Do you sleep?
Well, I do have a lifelong history of insomnia, so not much, but I do sleep. I make time for it all. And in fact, next week I have a full week vacation. There will be none of any of those things that week.
Oh, good for you. Excellent. Excellent. That's very cool. Well, obviously you have put a lot of yourself into your profession. And I'm wondering if you could tell me about some of the challenges that you have faced as a professional woman across the years.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this question, Regina, and I love thinking about this in general, particularly in terms of women in finances and financial security. In my work at Women's Resource Center, one of the most common scenarios we found was women facing whatever. It might be divorce, it might be homelessness, it might be mental health crisis, but finances were always the primary obstacle to
Yeah.
them getting the help, support, services they need, to them, taking a next step in life. Um, in my career, so I've always worked in mental health or education or social services, some in the private sector, some in nonprofit, none particularly well paying. So, this field is really predominantly females. Um, I don't know, like as many of the helping professionals, have been.
Tend
We
to
see
be.
more male nurses. We also see more male counselors and therapists now. But it's been predominantly female. And also, yeah, historically sort of low paying. So for starters, I think just that sort of gender divide in the sort of underpayment in the helping professions sets a lot of people up at like a disadvantage.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
one piece. And then I think parenthood often falls heavily on a woman. Every circumstance is different, clearly. And, of course, I at Women's Resource Center for years worked only with women. So that's the side of the stories that I hear most. But, myself, I was a single parent. I had my son unexpectedly right after I finished graduate school. And so that was a surprise blessing. And it did change the trajectory of my career, though, because now it changed um, the opportunities I had and
Yeah.
the financial investment I could make.
Yeah.
So after a master's degree in counseling, you have to get 3,000 hours of supervised clinical work, and the supervision is 2 hours per 40 hours worked. And typically you pay someone their hourly rate, like another therapist. So it's like paying for therapy twice a week for
Oh.
2 to 6 years, depending on how you work.
Oh.
So I couldn't do that. So I couldn't get licensed for a long time because I have
Yeah.
a son and a son in daycare. I couldn't switch jobs easily. I loved my work all across those years, but I needed more money all across those years
Yeah.
too.
Oh yeah. Kids are
So
expensive.
kids are expensive. And so that was a challenge. And the reality of childcare. I was blessed for many years to have my mom. In fact, for a while, we lived right next door to her. So she would watch my son after school once he started full-time school. But it was hard to work. I always had a second job or a side gig, and I had to find things I could do that didn't demand like more childcare. Then
Right.
it doesn't. So in order to sort of increase my income, get on my feet financially, you have to pay to do that if you have a kid. So
Right.
that's one thing about being a professional woman. I think that again, even in coupled, partnerships, parenthood can often sort of limit one or both parties. And so that was my experience. It was several years where, especially financially, I just was kind of stuck. That was just the reality.
Yeah. And that's really tough. I mean, and I agree with you. I think the younger generation is doing a better job balancing the parenting. But certainly that wasn't, you know, the case for our generation as much as the norm. So, we're trying to still have our careers, but yet primarily responsible for kids at the same time. So it's a lot.
It's so hard. I feel very lucky. I just got married last year at age 41. I do feel lucky. I know that we have a sort of equitable relationship, and I am glad to have that. And I'm glad that I didn't, like many people, sort of end up in a different weighted divide that becomes really hard to undo once that dynamic's set. So
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Good for you. That's pretty amazing.
thank you.
Exciting. So let's take a ride in the time machine and think about what is your retirement vision?
Well, just last year, I bought a new house with a 30-year mortgage.
Okay. Ooh, you got it in before those rates went up. Good
Yes,
job.
I did. Yes, I
Very
sure
good.
did. Every day I'm looking at the paper going, whew,
Yeah.
thank God. Um, but I don't want to be paying a mortgage when I'm 70. So right now, financially, I'm planning to pay to be sure that it's paid off by the time I'm 65 at the latest. So that I can just be free then if I want to be. I know myself, I'm not going to stop working entirely at retirement age. I love my work. I'll always do a little bit of something, I'm sure of it. But really, I just want to be set up in a way that I don't have to,
Mhm.
that's,
Yeah.
for my soul and not for my wallet. So that's what I'm working toward. No big like travel plans. Everyone says they want to travel when they retire. I just want to like be at home with my garden and hopefully grandkids, definitely pets, and enjoy a different pace of life for a while.
Yeah, that's sounds so good. And you hit upon a really important part that makes a huge difference. And it's, you know, if I when I retire, I work because I want to, not because I have to.
Correct.
That gives you so much more power, so much more choice, and the ability to live the life that you do want to live versus you have to live a certain way. Right. It's
Absolutely.
two totally different concepts, and it really changes the dynamic of anyone's retirement, whether or not it's a choice or, the choice to work versus, oh, I have to work.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. And
That's right. I think to your point, every time we have a choice, even pre-retirement, to be able to choose the line of work we're in, to be able to choose the sort of maybe hours we work, or um, to be able to do things sort of on our terms or things that
Mhm.
fit for us. It's very different than when you're doing something for survival.
Right. Right. Yeah, no, that's so true. It's such a good point. And I have conversations with people about that, because a lot of my it's different. Like, and it's funny, I was talking to somebody else today, like our parents, when they retired, they retired, right? Now we retire to something else, like we retire to a different career, or to volunteer, or do all sorts of different things, and that's really a healthier style of retiring. But the clear thing is that you have choices
Right.
based on what you've done for yourself. So I think that is helpful to a lot of people, and again, it helps people have a healthier lifestyle and a healthier retirement when they get to make those choices based on things that are available because of all the things that they have done to prepare.
That's exactly right. I
Yeah.
could not agree more.
Yeah. And then one other thing, you were talking about something earlier, and it's like in my head, I was like, oh, and it just came back to me when people retire. I talk with, obviously I'm a financial planner, so I help people plan for retirement. But one of the things that people don't really think about is, a lot of people think, okay, well, calendar year, I'm going to retire at the end of the calendar year. And that way, January 1st, I start the year and I'm retired. The problem, especially where we live in the East Coast, Northeast part of the country, it's cold and dark in the winter, and it's actually not the best time to retire. When you look at the studies, because it's too cold to go out. It's snowing, it's icy, you can't drive to whatever. Whereas if you retire in the spring, in the early spring, it's like a new life is starting, because things are starting to come back to life, the trees, the plants, everything else. It's literally like a light bulb in your head. Like it just flows so much better. And then you get out, you're outside more. It's an opportunity for people to join groups and try new things. And so that by the time the winter rolls around again, they've already have new established
Mhm.
routines and groups and friends, and it sets them up for a much more successful retirement. And that has nothing to do with money, right?
No,
That has nothing to do with money. It's just how you approach it.
I think that's such a great point. That's such a great point because, many people are surprised after retirement that, after a few months, they might feel like lonely or bored
Oh,
or
yeah.
restless or purposeless or those sort of things. And to your point, to retire at a time in the year where it's like this cyclical renewal time anyway, and that people are outdoors more, people have like vacation in the summer, so maybe they're even more available, there's more activities happening. It's so important to start like being plugged into networks, either
Yeah.
existing ones or new ones. And I think that's just such a great point. Yeah, save
Yeah.
it for the spring.
Yeah, absolutely. That's my soapbox for today.
I love it. It's great to hear.
Yeah. Well, Angela, thank you so much for joining me. You were absolute pleasure to speak to. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Regina. It was so nice to talk with you.
Thanks. And thank you everyone else for joining us today. Again, I'm Regina McCann-Hess, president of Forge Wealth. My website is forgewealth.com. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Forge Wealth, and on LinkedIn, I'm Regina McCann-Hess. And hey, start thinking about your vision for retirement as you're driving along today. Thanks.